guys, it's Kelly here, and I am back with another video for Casing Genius. This video is kind of like a twofer because it's also for Nina Marie's 1,000 YouTube followers blog hop. So I'm using Happy Wishes, which is a new set by W+9. I'm going to do some no-line coloring, but Tracey's third card had this really pretty subtle, how about I talk correctly, subtle chevron background. So I kind of wanted to do the same thing, and I'm going to use the My Favorite Things diagonal stripe stencil to get that. So I'm using some shaded lilac distress ink and a mini ink blender to get that onto my paper. And I'm doing it, I got the layout, I guess, from Tracey's second card, where there was more, there was something in the bottom right and something in the top left. So this piece of paper is a little smaller than a regular size car front, and the reason that is because the stencil is only so large. So Nina Marie is endlessly talented, and she has reached 1,000 followers on her YouTube channel. If you don't follow her, I suggest that you go do that, because I mean, you will not be sorry. She's so ridiculously talented, and I'm thrilled that she invited me to celebrate her her accomplishment. So I'm using some Falling Star ink by W+9, and I'm going to do some stamping. Now, at first, the reason you see me doing this here is because I didn't know if I was going to have to do second generation stamping. Turns out that I called it Falling Star, didn't I? It's fairy dust. Sweet Jesus, fairy dust. I always do that. Why do I always mix them up? I don't know. Anyway, it's light enough that I could just stamp it directly. So I'm just using the guide I already had stamped to go ahead and stamp down everything exactly the same. I'm going to do some no-line Copic coloring over top of it. Tracey had florals in her first and her second card. So I wanted to incorporate those, and her first card was super tropical, but I just did a palm tree card not that long ago, so I didn't want to go the palm tree route again, so I thought maybe I could get a color scheme together that would help this card feel a little bit tropical. So I picked the colors from her cards. She has a lot of different colored circles in her third card, and I took the yellow from the first card. So here I'm using some blue violets, and I showed you 4 colors, but for the smaller of the flowers, I actually only used 3. Started with my lightest color and using light pressure, just the tip, flicking motion. I added my lightest, my medium, and then my darkest. And then I worked in reverse from darkest, medium to light. Except when I'm doing the last version of the light, I'm actually starting at the edges and bringing it in toward the middle. And I will show you that again with the darker flower, because with the darker flower, I add that 4th color. I just felt like the smaller ones couldn't really carry that much color. I would be losing those soft tips of the flower, which I think is really kind of pretty. It makes them look like they're kind of like floating on the card. So no-line Copic coloring is something that I'm still practicing. I don't by any means pretend to be an expert here, but I have found that last little bit with taking your lightest color and following the lines that are already laid down for you towards the rest of your shading seems to work for me the best. Because a lot of times with the no-line coloring, I get a little heavy-handed and I skip the separation. You have to keep those petals separate, otherwise it just looks like one huge blob. You don't want that. You don't want a blobby flower. You want something that looks like an actual flower. So once I was done with these flowers, there's also some teeny tiny little bud flowers that are included in this set, and I wanted to bring in that yellow color. So I picked a few yellows. Now I did start with the Y11, but to be honest, by the time it was all said and done, it was really just the Y02 and the Y38. But I was hesitant to go in with a super bright color in the beginning because I wasn't really sure how it was going to work. When I picked my color scheme for this card, you know, looking at the colors that Tracey had in her previous cards, I was trying to find something that was A, tropical, and B, that was going to be complementary. So purples and yellows are always complementary to each other. when I looked at the color wheel, basically what I did was I tried to find things that were across from each other, like across the street from each other, and then, or like in a triangle pattern. There's lots of little tips and tricks that you can use. Anything that's across from each other is always going to be a good bet. So the purples and yellows is where I started, and then from there I kind of branched out to pick my my greenery colors. So these were super simple and not a ton of shading because they're so small. I didn't want to lose the shape of the petal. And then I'm showing you the YG99, but I didn't use that either. Like, I'm full of lies in this video. I'm just full of it. There's two different types of leaves that are stamped on my card. One is a smaller, just 2 leaves, and then there's some other larger branches, and I decided that I wanted those to be separate. I wanted them to be segregated from each other in different colors. So I did the YGs for the ones that were, I guess, underneath or closer to the flowers, and my technique is never changing. It's always very light pressure, flicking motion, and then bringing that lightest color in from the edge on my final pass. And so then I did all of the YGs, and then I also used my mid, what was that, YG95, to draw in the stems for those little, why can't I talk tonight? Little buttercup flowers. Worst voiceover ever. Sorry. You get what you get, guys. So then for the larger ones, I wanted to bring in some BGs, and I went a little out of order. So I used the BG72, and then I used a BG18 because it's a brighter teal, and I was really digging that little bit of brighter color. And then for my darkest color, I used BG78, which is again more muted. It's still darker on the pigment scale than the 18, but not as bright. I wanted to have a little bit of that brightness. And I only showed you one of these because you watched me color, what is that, 7 petals? All the same way. Petals, 7 leaves, all the same way. And then once that was completed, I had to go back in and stamp in the center of the flowers. So I'm going to use some Pure Mango from W+9. And there's 2 different flower centers that are included. One for the, actually I think there's more than 2 to be honest. There's some for the smaller and then for the larger. So I'm just filling those in where they would go naturally. And I was really digging the way that it was looking. I loved the subtle stripe in the background. And Tracey has 2 cards that have her third and her second and third card have really bold sentiments, and I love that. I love a black sentiment, so I embraced that and went ahead and stamped down the large sentiment from this set. But on her first card, she had a banner, and I wanted to include that. So W+9 again released some separate dies. They don't match a stamp set. They're just dies on their own, and this banner happens to be one of them. Cuts 2 pieces, which is pretty cool, an outline and a solid piece. We're going to use a solid piece. I'm going to bring back in those Copics. The die makes like a little notch as to where the front and the like where the little tails would stick out. So I just followed that line from the little notch and added in some darker shading. And this BB000 looks super dark, but it's just because the paper's wet. Like, it dries back a ton. So don't be nervous. And then I'm just going to go in again and outline that. It turned out after it all dried, it wasn't dark enough for me, so I'll show you how I fixed that. This For You is also included in that same Happy Wishes set. I'm using the same W+9 black ink for my sentiment, stamping that down on there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that with some Scotch foam tape just for a little bit of dimension. Everything on here is flat thus far, so I thought that the banner being popped up would be super cute. And like I said, I got that idea from Tracey's first card with the little banner, though she heat embossed hers. I didn't. So once I get that down there, and you can see me, I'm hesitating, and it's not because I don't wonder where it should be, it's because I don't like the shading in the background. So here we go with the grays. You know how I feel about shadows, ladies and gents. This is not news to you. I think shadows are important, and I think that they add a lot of life to your card, so I wanted to make sure that the shadows on that were correct. And then from here, I'm just going to mount it on a white card base. Tracey's very clean and simple card maker, and a lot of her cards had some white area, so I didn't want to lose that completely. And then once that's down, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some clear Wink of Stella just on the purple flowers, which I probably should have done before the banner, but I didn't. So for the blog hop, for Nina Marie's blog hop, there are prizes. And there's tons of talented designers. I think there's 7 of us total. So I hope that you will hop around. If you're watching on the blog, it will be listed on the blog. If you're watching on YouTube, it will be listed in the description below. I know there's a gift certificate to like Newton's Nook and Neat and Tangled. So don't miss out on your opportunity to see some really awesome people make some really awesome cards, and B, maybe win some free stuff. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.